This is going to be a hard story for some of you to hear. I want you to know that up front. But this is a necessary story to tell. In fact, it has to be told. It has to be told for the little black girl who lived and died for it. This video is the second in a series I'm doing on what happens when the law leaves us, when it abandons black people completely. Not by accident, but by design. In the first video, I told you about a black man who watched the law twisted and contorted to have him lynched by a court. This story is different. This one is about a little black girl who was put in a situation that cost her her life because the law did not value black girls. She suffered in life and in death because of the law. So I want to give you a warning right now that this story may make some of you angry. You may have strong feelings while hearing it. You may even feel physically sick. If you feel that you have to stop and walk away, that's fine. It's completely normal. I just ask that you come back and continue watching. And I want you to do it for the little black girl in this story, and for all the black girls and black women who said no and suffered for it. All of the black girls and black women who were made to feel unseen, unheard, and unloved. Who were made to feel like they did not matter, like their bodies were never truly their own. Listening is part of the work. It's how we honor the people they tried to erase. Now, let me tell you the story that they tried to bury. Hattie McCray was born in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1916 to William and Merlilia McCray. We don't know much about William. Merlilia was born to the daughter of a free African-American mother and an Afro-Cuban father who had immigrated to the United States from Havana. Together, they had 3 children, all girls. Hattie was the youngest. We aren't sure what happened to William, but records indicate that he died around 1918. The 1920 census shows Merlilia living alone with her 3 daughters, Margelle, Helen, and Hattie. The census also shows her as a widower. By 1930, Hattie was 14 years old. Her mother worked as a cook for a white family. After the death of William, Merlilia carried on. She continued to work hard to support her family. They lived in a tiny home on Gravier Street, on a racially integrated block in downtown New Orleans. But it was the Depression era, and times were hard, especially for black people. Because as the old saying goes, when white America got a cold, black America got the flu, maybe even pneumonia. Merlilia had done her best to take care of her girls in the 10 years since her husband had died. But she could no longer do it by herself. The family was in dire financial straits, and everyone needed to help. Her 16-year-old daughter, Helen, and 19-year-old Margelle took jobs working as domestics for white families. And 14-year-old Hattie had to quit school. She took a job at Matt's Place, an oyster restaurant owned by Matt and Bessie Picoon. It was 3 blocks from her home. The plan was just for her to make a little extra money. But this job would put her in Jim Crow's line of sight. She was no longer a child at the restaurant. She was a black woman. Or at least that's how Jim Crow saw her. A black woman who was available to any white man who wanted her body. At first, things were going fine at the restaurant. That was until February of 1930, when 27-year-old Charles Guerin walked into the restaurant and set his sights on Hattie. Guerin worked for the New Orleans Police Department as a temporary officer. He was assigned to the 10th Precinct, which covered the area where Matt's Place was located. He became a regular at the restaurant, and after Hattie started working there, he developed an unhealthy obsession with her. It started with lewd comments and inappropriate suggestions, but it escalated to something much worse, something evil, something dark. The kind of darkness that followed black women and girls throughout their history in this country. On February 9th, 1930, Guerin went to work and completed his shift. But afterwards, he did not go home. He started drinking, heavily. The next day, on February 10th, he drank all day. And then he stumbled into the restaurant. Once he saw Hattie, he immediately went after her. Not to say hello, but to take her body. Hattie had become the obsession of this man, and he did not let up. He began harassing her. He walked directly into the kitchen where she was working, and he cornered her. And he demanded that she have sex with him. Hattie did her best to rebuff him. She refused, but he would not stop. He just kept at her, harassing and threatening. He left the restaurant, but not for long. He came back later that day, looking for Hattie. and he did the same thing again. He went right into the kitchen and went for Hattie, demanding that she have sex with him. He had to have her, and he was not taking no for an answer. I have to say this, because this must have been a terrifying moment for Hattie. This was a child we're talking about, a little girl, cornered by a man that she had never met, a man she did not know, a man who saw her body as something that he could take. And all she had done was show up to work that day. That was it. That was her only mistake. Being black, being a girl, and being in sight. But none of that mattered to him, because in his mind, he had the right to her. And the more she refused, the angrier he became. He again left, but not for long. When Garand came back in, he still had Hattie on his mind. And once again, he went straight into the kitchen and toward 14-year-old Hattie and made his demand again. Bessie Piccoon, one of the restaurant's owners, had to step in to try to pull him away from Hattie. Garand listened to her. He didn't want to pursue a black girl in front of a white woman. The only thing that stopped him was his deference to Bessie, not the violence of his actions, not the age of Hattie, not the wrongness of what he was doing. That tells you exactly how little was thought of black girls. Before leaving again, Garand grew tired of Hattie's refusal. He told her that if she stepped foot outside their restaurant, that he would arrest her. And then he left. I'm not sure about you, but telling this story makes me think about the fear Hattie must have felt. As I've said before, when we tell these stories, we often speak from a distance. We say things like, wow, I can't believe that. Or, if I were there, I would have done this. Or maybe, why didn't she just leave? And there's nothing wrong with that. Those thoughts are natural. But what we're doing in those moments is reflecting in the past tense. But this happened in real time. Injustice happened in real time. To real people, experiencing it at the moment. This happened to Hattie in real time. Hattie experienced every second of this, smelling his breath, felt his body. She was simply trying to wash dishes, and a white man was coming into her job for no reason at all and harassing her. She was a little black girl, and he was a grown white man. Hattie had no rights and no power. In that moment, he was the law, and he had all of the power. I want you to really think about that. Think about the fear that went through her as he stood over her, demanding, threatening, touching, and grabbing. She was barely 5 feet tall. He was 10 inches taller than Hattie and weighed close to 100 pounds more than she did. Think about how powerless she felt. No mother or father around to protect her from this man. No one coming to save her. Not even her white bosses would stop Garand. Think about how alone she felt in those moments. All she wanted to do was work, and all he wanted was her. Saying no was not going to stop this. A lot of black women and girls said no, and still it happened. Still, they were violated. But what happened next? Well, the only way I can really put it is, what happened next is horrific and devastating. Just before 3:30 p.m., Garand came back to the restaurant, and he went right back into the kitchen where Hattie was. He tried to get Hattie to have sex with him again, but still, she mustered the courage and strength, and she told him no, once more. No, he could not have her. No, to leave her alone. Just no. Garand had had enough. He was tired of no. He felt he had a right to Hattie, and she had told him no for the last time. Garand stormed out of the kitchen and went into the dining area. He found Matt Piccoon and asked him if his wife Bessie was there. Matt said she wasn't. And Garand told him that he was going to go into the kitchen and take Hattie's life. The actual words he used were much more graphic than that, but I will not repeat them here. I'll tell you this though. When he referred to Hattie, he used a racial slur, and he called her a wench. And after he said what he planned to do to Hattie, do you think Matt Piccoon said anything or stopped him from going in there? No. He didn't, and no one in the restaurant did. No one could be bothered. No one dared or cared to step in to protect Hattie. Garand stormed into the kitchen. He went at Hattie again and demanded one more time. Hattie refused and tried to get away. She turned around and began to run from him. Garand then pulled out his weapon and fired at Hattie as she ran. He struck her in the back of her head. The round exited near the socket of her right eye. She fell to the floor in the kitchen, alone and by herself, and clinging to life. I don't want us to move past this so quickly. I don't want us to rush through this pain. I want you to really go back to that kitchen. Allow yourself to be in that moment when Hattie just wanted to get away, wanted it to stop, wanted to not be scared, to not be terrified. It's painful to think about. Hattie had no idea that when she went to work that day, that she was not going to make it home, that it would be the last time she saw her mother, the last time she saw her sisters, the last time for everything. Life was always dangerous for Black people in the Jim Crow South. Existing and being Black was a crime. But this was something different. What happened to Hattie was different. She wasn't caught in a mob. She wasn't swept up in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was targeted, hunted, inside a kitchen at work, by a man she didn't know. A man who decided that her life and her no didn't matter. After hearing the shots, when Matt Piccoon looked up, he saw Garand standing in the doorway with his weapon still in his hand, smoke rising from the barrel. Matt Piccoon was stunned, as if he had not just heard Garand say what he planned to do. He looked at him and asked, "What did you do that for?" Garand simply said that he was trying to have her, and she resisted. Then he added to his story. He claimed that Hattie had come at him with a knife that was sitting on the table near the roast beef, and that's when he fired. But Piccoon knew that that was a lie. There was no knife near Hattie, and he knew it. That's when he finally called the police. Within 10 minutes, the police had arrived. Hattie was taken to Charity Hospital. The police spoke to Garand and to the Piccoons. Garand told his story, but he was quickly arrested for firing dangerously, wounding Hattie, and being drunk. Officers searched the area to see if they could find a weapon like Garand claimed Hattie had, but no weapon was found. Hattie had been seriously wounded, and there was no saving her. She would die 7 hours later. At just 14 years old, her life was taken from her. A child, gone. After that, New Orleans Police Chief Theodore Ray fired Garand from the police department. The Orleans Parish District Attorney Eugene Stanley ordered that his charges be upgraded to intentionally taking Hattie's life. This was an unusual step for District Attorney Eugene Stanley. At the time, New Orleans was not a friendly place for Black people, and cases involving police officers taking Black lives rarely got prosecuted. Stanley was known for being extremely pro-police. In fact, he dropped 43% of cases where police officers took someone's life before they even went to a grand jury. Even more startling, between 1920 and 1945, Orleans Parish grand juries refused to indict police officers in 95% of police fatal cases involving Black victims. After Hattie's death, the Black community was outraged. This was another senseless attack on a Black girl. And Black people had had enough. They wanted it to stop. They wanted something to be done about it. Hattie's story was a story of a lot of young Black girls. Girls who had to step out of childhood and into adulthood to help their families. They faced the same trauma and same pain that Hattie experienced. One of those girls, 16-year-old Althea Hart, wrote to W.E.B. Du Bois, who at the time was the editor of the NAACP magazine, The Crisis. Althea, like Hattie, was forced to drop out of school so she could help her family bring in more money. She had never been politically active before, but Hattie's death sparked something in her, and she wanted justice. She told Du Bois that for too many of our people, they had suffered the same injustice as Hattie, and the same thing would continue if Black people did not stand up and fight for what's best. But it wasn't just Althea. The fight for Hattie stretched across the entire city. The New Orleans NAACP joined forces with the Federation of Civic Leagues and the Louisiana Weekly to organize community meetings to raise funds. They knew the system wouldn't deliver justice on its own, so they pushed from the outside and the inside. Everyday people donated what they could: Church leaders spoke out. Local organizers treated this case not just as a tragedy, but as a test. They raised the money to hire attorney Charles Lusenberg Sr. He was a well-respected attorney and had previously served as a district attorney in Orleans Parish. The local NAACP wanted to send a clear message to the white power structure that this case was important. Charles Garand went to trial on April 3, 1930. Assistant DA J. Bernard Cook and attorney Charles Lusenberg prosecuted the case for the state. Judge Albert D. Heinrichs presided. He had worked with both DA Stanley and Lusenberg in the district attorney's office before coming to the bench. Garand was appointed attorney A.J. Hollander to represent him. The trial lasted just one day. The jury was all white and all male. Judge Heinrichs took the unusual step of having the jury tour the restaurant where Hattie worked before the trial even began. Because Garand was claiming that it was self-defense and said that Hattie had a knife, Judge Heinrichs believed that it was crucial for the jury to see where Hattie worked and where she was standing when Garand fired at her. That decision proved critical. Garand's self-defense claim fell apart when the jury saw just how far the knives and the cutting boards were from where the incident occurred. This forced Attorney Hollander to change strategies in the middle of the trial. He abandoned the self-defense claim and instead argued that Garand had been so drunk that he was of unbalanced mind and not responsible for his act. Now, this wasn't just a random defense. It was strategic. At the time, what was called acute and pathologic intoxication was considered a form of legal insanity. The prosecution called 6 witnesses in their case in chief. Among them was Hattie's mother, Malilia. They also called Matt Pecum, who testified about what Garand told him. Bessie Pecum took the stand as well. She told the jury what she saw and how Garand had harassed Hattie. Corporal William Milton, the officer who arrested Garand, he gave some of the most damaging testimony. He told the jury that Garand was not drunk, at least not in the strict sense of the word. In his opinion, Garand was in his right mind and he only fired at Hattie after she resisted his attempt to violate her. Another officer, Joseph Kasser, told the jury that Garand answered all of his questions clearly, and he showed no signs of being drunk. But not every officer told the truth. There was one who chose to uphold the thin blue line. Patrolman Eugene Furlani testified that Garand was obviously very drunk. And for that testimony, Assistant DA J. Bernard Cook had Furlani arrested as soon as he stepped off the witness stand. He was charged with perjury. The state said that his testimony was a lie because it conflicted with that of all the other officers who had reported and testified in court. Garand's attorney called 13 witnesses to testify on his behalf. Most of them spoke about what a good person he was. Garand took the stand in his own defense as well, and he went full steam ahead with his intoxication defense. He claimed that he started drinking at midnight and continued until midday. He claimed that when he woke up in jail, he had no memory of what had occurred. He said he didn't even remember harassing Hattie, didn't recall trying to force himself on that 14-year-old girl, couldn't remember a thing, and he was shocked when he found out what he was charged with. His brother Emmett also took the stand to back him up. He told the jury that when he visited his brother in jail, that his brother was so drunk that he couldn't even recognize him. The jury heard what it needed. After 45 minutes of deliberation, the all-white jury found him guilty as charged. Guilty of intentionally taking Hattie McCray's life. He was sentenced to death for his crime. Now, this was not to be taken lightly. Between 1920 and 1945, Charles Garand was the only police officer convicted of taking a civilian's life out of 104 police-involved deaths. It was the first time a white man was found guilty of a capital crime in New Orleans for taking the life of a black person. Garand's conviction was reported by papers all across the country, both white and black. Now, normally, these kinds of cases were discussed with a tone that played into the Jezebel myth that was put on black women and black girls. The lie that said that black women were naturally promiscuous, that they always wanted it, that they couldn't be violated because they were never innocent to begin with. But in this case, some papers were willing to speak honestly about what had happened. The New Orleans Times-Picayune stated the obvious, that if Garand had been black and Hattie had been white, this would have turned out a lot worse. Some papers spoke about Hattie's innocence and her virtue, something not often said when the press talked about black women and black girls. They used terms like predator and beast to describe Garand, were usually reserved for black men. In the black community, the guilty verdict was huge, unexpected. People were legitimately shocked by it. What happened to Hattie was rarely prosecuted. And even when it was, juries will almost never hold a white person accountable. But this time they did, and black people expressed shock, but also jubilation, joy that justice had come, finally. The Chicago Defender ran a front-page headline about the conviction. It called the verdict totally unexpected. And to be honest, black people had every right to be shocked. Justice never came for black girls in cases like this. Just 2 years earlier in 1928, a 12-year-old black girl named Gertrude Kelly and her 11-year-old friend Dolores Bowles were forced from a New Orleans street by a 26-year-old white man. He violated Dolores while holding a weapon on her. The man was charged, but it took the jury just 3 minutes to acquit him of all charges. So you can see how black people were shocked when the verdict came back guilty for Garand. I want to be clear about something. This was a victory, but not the way that you think. It was not a sign of progress. It was not a turning point. It was not the dawn of a new day. No, it was actually the opposite. It was a verdict meant to keep the old day from slipping away. The conviction of Charles Garand, the white police officer who took Hattie McCray's life, it was rare. It was historic. But do not confuse rarity with righteousness. And do not mistake a guilty verdict for justice. Because this was not about Hattie. It was not about valuing black life. It was about disciplining white failure. The man who pulled the trigger was not a symbol of power. He was a problem for power. He drank too much. He did not keep his violence quiet. He broke the rules of how you were supposed to keep black people in their place. And he did it in front of other white people. That is what made him dangerous. Not the violence. It was the mess that he caused. Eugene Stanley, the district attorney who prosecuted him, did not do it to protect Hattie. He did it to protect order, a racial order, a political order, and a class order. One where black suffering is expected. One where white authority remains challenged so long as it looks respectable while doing it. So yes, Charles Garand was found guilty, but it was not because the system cared about Hattie McCray. It was because he embarrassed the system. The courtroom did not speak for justice. It spoke for black containment. The goal was not to fix black injustice. The goal was to preserve it, and to preserve it with cleaner hands and with better manners. And there's something else, because we have to tell the truth here. Hattie was believed because she was dead. The lie that was usually told, the one about black girls being fast or always willing or too grown for their own good, that lie does not hold up so well when the girl cannot speak, when she has been silenced permanently, not by shame, but because her body is in the morgue. Her lifeless body is the evidence of both the truth and the lie, the truth of what was done to her, and the lie that cannot overcome it. Jim Crow knew how to tear black girls like Hattie down while they were still breathing. He knew how to take their virtue and then blame them for losing it. He knew how to question their character, impugn their integrity, and turn their no into a yes. But he struggled to do that when the girl could not answer back, when there were witnesses, when there was still blood in the kitchen, and the truth could not be cross-examined. When that happened, Jim Crow had to shift. He had to prosecute. He had to put on a show trial. One of his own had gone too far and exposed the lie. And that exposure was causing cracks in Jim Crow's wall of black injustice. Remember the story of Rose I told you about? The 14-year-old black girl who was lured away from her family with the promise of a babysitting job? Then she was violated by the man? Well, Rose lived, and she was called a liar. She told the truth and was torn down for it. And in a way, that is what makes Hattie's case so tragic. The truth came forward, but it was at the expense of her life. She was believed, but she had to die for it. Her present and her future were stolen both at the same time. Even though there was a guilty verdict, this case was far from over. Because you have to remember, this was still the Jim Crow South in 1930. And no matter the situation, no matter how others felt, Jim Crow always had to have the last say. And this next part of the story is going to prove that. The next part of the story does not end in justice. It's just more injustice. A day after the guilty verdict, A.J. Hollander, Garand's attorney, appealed the decision on the grounds that Garand was insane. He requested the appointment of a lunacy commission to determine his sanity. Under Louisiana state law, judges were required to appoint the commission when requested, but that was not going to be easy before Judge Heinrichs. He had a reputation for being a tough judge and handed down harsh sentences. He had sent more people to death row than any other judge in Louisiana during that era. He quickly denied the request for the appointment of a commission. He said that the insanity defense should have been raised before the trial, not after. But Attorney Hollander was not deterred. He claimed he only received new information after the trial had ended. He said Garand's family had a history of mental illness. He told the judge that 2 of Garand's cousins were classified as imbeciles and that his father had died from syphilis of the brain. Then he produced hospital records that showed Garand had suffered a head injury in August of 1923. He had been hit in the head with a metal pipe and sustained a concussion and a small laceration. There were no doctor's notes of brain damage, but Hollander argued that the injury had weakened Garand's mental faculties. But it didn't stop there. Hollander also said that in December of that same year, in 1923, Garand tried to take his own life. He claimed that Garand had been hospitalized for mercury contamination and said that it was evidence of intentional self-poisoning. Hollander appealed this all the way to the Louisiana Supreme Court. The court ruled in Garand's favor and ordered Judge Heinrichs to appoint a lunacy commission. The commission was composed of 3 doctors, one of whom was George Rowland, the Orleans Parish coroner and a staunch supporter of the police. The commission examined Garand, and they came back with their findings. They found him to be insane. Charles Garand would not go to the gallows. He would not get his death sentence. He would be spared that. Instead, he was ordered to be confined to the state mental asylum for 5 years until he was found to be competent to stand trial again. And that's where Charles Garand remained for 5 years, until 1935, when the commission reconvened. They declared him competent to undergo a new trial. At this point, many expected Garand to be freed. Louisiana law gave judges the power to release defendants who were found to be insane at the time of the crime. By this time, Judge Heinrichs had died, and the new judge had taken over the case. His name was Fred Osser. He refused to dismiss the charges against Garand. He ruled that Garand would stand trial once more. What followed was 2 years of legal proceedings that I won't bore you with right now. But during those 2 years, Garand sat in the parish jail awaiting his second trial. Finally, on March 2nd, 1937, Garand returned to court. Rather than face a second trial, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter. He was sentenced to serve 1 to 3 years in prison and was released in 1940. In all, Garand served just 8 years in custody. That included the time he was held before trial, in the state asylum, and in the penitentiary. After he was released, he returned to his life. He lived with his mother and worked as a cabinet maker. In August of 1941, Charles Garand walked to a vacant lot just a few blocks from where he took Hattie's life. He placed a weapon to his chest and he fired. He took his own life. Hattie McCray was a little black girl, and she should have been allowed to be a child, to be cherished. Instead, she was chased and cut down. When she should have been playing and learning and growing, she was protecting herself, fighting for her space, fighting for her safety, fighting for her body, and fighting to be left alone. Hattie McCray was not a symbol. She was a sister, a daughter, a friend. She was a child who loved and was loved. She deserved protection. She deserved peace. And the law should have given her both. But the law did what it did so often. It left her. It left her because she was black. It left all the Hatties of the world to the hands of those who would harm them. It left them unguarded, unwanted, unprotected. How many other Hatties are out there, buried by silence, drowned by the shame that was forced upon them? How many little black girls were violated, erased, and never named? How many more? We may not know their names, but we know this. Hattie McCray mattered. Her life mattered. And her memory still cries out for justice. She got a verdict, but she did not get honor. And she did not get justice. This is what happens when the law walks away, when it turns its back, when it leads black people to lawlessness. But we are not turning our backs. We are not walking away. We are bearing witness. We are telling the truth. We are keeping the record. We are carrying her memory, because memory is justice. And justice begins with testimony. So we remember Hattie McCray's name. We tell her story. And we're going to keep telling them, for Hattie and for all the others. And I'll be back in the next video as we move through this series with another name, another story, another reminder that when the law leaves us, we must not leave each other. Now, I want to hear from you. Had you ever heard of Hattie McCray before, and how did it make you feel learning what happened to her? Leave me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts.